Sit down, little ghetto girl. Adults are talking. Judge Richardson's words slice through the packed courtroom. 17-year-old Maya Williams stands frozen, every eye boring into her. Her father Marcus sits in handcuffs, head bowed. "Your Honor, my father is innocent." The judge slams his gavel. "Security, remove this child." He points at Maya like she's garbage. The gallery stares. Some shake their heads. Others smirk. The bailiff steps forward. Maya's father reaches toward her with shackled hands, tears streaming. The prosecutor shuffles papers, barely hiding his amusement. But Maya doesn't move. Her spine straightens. Her chin lifts. Her eyes narrow with laser focus. In this moment, surrounded by contempt, something awakens inside her. Something dangerous. 3 months earlier, Maya Williams sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by towers of yellowed law books. The cramped apartment in East Cleveland felt smaller with every passing year, but these books made her world infinite. "Dad, why do you keep all these old law books if you're just a construction worker?" Maya called out, holding up a battered copy of constitutional law. Marcus Williams appeared in her doorway, still in his work clothes, concrete dust coating his boots. His weathered hands told the story of 20 years building other people's dreams. But his eyes, those same sharp, intelligent eyes Maya inherited, told a different story. "Because knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us, baby girl," he said, settling beside her on the floor. "I may work with my hands, but I think with my mind. These books, they're insurance." Maya traced the worn spine of a civil rights case study. "Insurance against what?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching his daughter's fingers move across the legal text like she was reading sheet music. "Against a world that tries to make you small." At 17, Maya was already accepted to 3 universities with partial scholarships. Her guidance counselor called her college material. Her teachers praised her natural intelligence. But none of them knew about the midnight hours she spent in these books, absorbing precedents and procedures like other kids absorbed social media. Her bedroom walls told the real story. Where other teenagers hung posters of celebrities, Maya had taped up landmark Supreme Court decisions. Brown vs. Board, Miranda vs. Arizona, Gideon vs. Wainwright. Each case was a victory for someone who had been counted out. "Maya, dinner!" her mother Denise called from the kitchen. The Williams family gathered around their small table every night without fail. It was their sanctuary, their planning room, their place of dreams. Tonight, like every night, Marcus asked Maya about her day, really listened to her answers, and pushed her to think deeper. "Mrs. Peterson says I should consider pre-law at Howard," Maya said between bites of her mother's famous mac and cheese. "Howard's expensive," Denise said carefully. She worked double shifts at the hospital, and still they counted every dollar. "We'll find a way," Marcus said firmly. "Maya's got something special. You can see it in how she thinks, how she questions everything." Maya looked at her father. This man who woke up at 5 a.m. every day, who came home bone-tired but still helped her with homework, who believed in her dreams even when they seemed impossible. "I want to be a lawyer," she said quietly. "Not just any lawyer. I want to be the kind who fights for people like us." Marcus smiled, the same smile that had carried him through years of being overlooked and underestimated. "Then that's exactly what you'll be." But their world was about to shatter. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Maya was getting ready for school. Marcus had been working on a major construction project downtown, a new office building that would house law firms and financial companies. The kind of building he'd never be allowed to work inside, only build. The job site was dangerous. Safety violations were common. But workers like Marcus couldn't complain without risking their jobs. When Marcus saw a crane operator showing up drunk, endangering the entire crew, he did what his conscience demanded. He confronted his supervisor, Jake Morrison, a man who treated the mostly black and Hispanic crew like expendable equipment. "Morrison, Rodriguez is drunk on the crane. Someone's going to get killed, Marcus said. Morrison barely looked up from his clipboard. Mind your business, Williams. You're paid to build, not think. I'm paid to go home alive, Marcus shot back. And so is everyone else here. That's when Morrison snapped. He shoved Marcus hard, screaming about uppity workers who don't know their place. Marcus stumbled backward, his hard hat falling off. The other workers watched in tense silence. They'd seen this before. Morrison's explosive temper, his particular hatred for anyone who questioned his authority. Marcus steadied himself, his voice calm but firm. Touch me again, and we'll have a problem. Morrison swung first. What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but it would change everything. Marcus defended himself, pushing Morrison away when the man came at him again. Morrison fell, hitting his head on a stack of rebar. By the time the police arrived, Morrison had crafted his story. The security cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. The crew, terrified of losing their jobs, said nothing. Marcus Williams, honor student's father, devoted husband, man who'd never been arrested in his life, was handcuffed and charged with aggravated assault. And Maya Williams's real education was about to begin. The Cleveland Public Library became Maya's second home, but it wasn't by choice. Every morning at 8 a.m. sharp, Maya claimed the same corner table in the legal research section. The librarians knew her by name now, the teenager who spent 12 hours a day buried in case law while her classmates worried about prom dates. "Honey, we're closing in 10 minutes, Mrs. Lane said gently. Maya looked up from criminal procedure manuals, her eyes red and strained. "Just 10 more minutes? I'm so close to understanding this precedent." Mrs. Lane's expression softened. She'd watched Maya transform from a bright student into something desperate and determined. "You can't save him if you collapse from exhaustion." But Maya couldn't stop. Every hour she wasn't researching felt like another nail in her father's coffin. The public defender assigned to Marcus was David Garrett, a burned-out attorney juggling 47 active cases. When Maya and her mother met him, he barely glanced up from his computer. Williams, he muttered, clicking through files. "Ah, yes, the construction assault. Pretty straightforward. Prosecution's offering 2 years if he pleads guilty. I'd take it." Maya's hands clenched. "But he's innocent. Morrison attacked first." Garrett finally looked at her, his expression mixing pity and annoyance. "Sweetheart, that's not how the system works. It's your father's word against a supervisor's. Guess who the jury will believe?" "There were witnesses," Maya said. "Witnesses who want to keep their jobs." Garrett pulled out a form. "Look, I've been doing this for 15 years. Black defendant, white victim, construction site altercation. The math is simple. 2 years is a gift." Maya's mother spoke up quietly. "What if we fight it?" Garrett laughed bitterly. "Then he's looking at 10 years minimum. Aggravated assault, possible hate crime enhancement because Morrison claims Marcus used racial slurs. You really want to roll those dice?" Maya felt the walls closing in. This man, paid to defend her father, had already given up. "Can't we get a different lawyer?" "Private attorneys cost $50,000 minimum. You have $50,000 lying around?" The Williams family went home that night in silence. Maya's scholarship letters sat unopened on her desk. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, dreams that felt increasingly meaningless. That's when Maya started digging deeper. Late one night, she discovered the Cleveland Municipal Court Records database. It took hours to navigate, but once she did, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Judge Harold Richardson had been presiding over criminal cases for 12 years. Maya pulled every case file she could access, creating spreadsheets that would make a statistician proud. The numbers told a horrifying story. In cases with black defendants and white victims, Judge Richardson's sentences averaged 394% higher than state guidelines. For white defendants with black victims, sentences averaged 23% below guidelines. Maya stared at her laptop screen at 3 a.m., hands shaking as she compiled the data. 43 black men had faced Judge Richardson in the past 2 years on similar charges. Average sentence, 8 years. Average sentence for white defendants on identical charges, 18 months. "Oh my God," she whispered to her empty bedroom. But the worst part wasn't the pattern. It was how systematic it appeared. Richardson wasn't just biased, he was methodical. Maya found dismissed cases where white defendants had done far worse than anything Marcus was accused of. Probation for assault charges that would have sent black men away for years. Maya printed everything, filling 3 binders with evidence of judicial bias that would make civil rights attorneys salivate. But who would listen to a 17-year-old girl? At school, Maya's world continued crumbling in smaller, more personal ways. "Maya, you missed the college fair meeting again," her guidance counselor said after pulling her aside. "Harvard called asking about your enrollment deposit. Are you having second thoughts?" Maya stared at the acceptance letter, the letter that used to represent everything she'd worked for. "I can't go to college while my father sits in prison for something he didn't do." "Maya, honey, I understand you're upset, but you can't throw away your future. Your father wouldn't want that." "My father is facing 10 years because nobody thinks he deserves a real defense." Ms. Rodriguez lowered her voice. Maybe he did do something wrong. Sometimes the people we love aren't who we think they are." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. Even here, where she'd been celebrated as a model student, people assumed her father's guilt based on nothing more than his skin color. Maya's best friend, Jessica, cornered her at lunch. "Maya, you're destroying yourself over this. Everyone can see it. You look terrible, your grades are slipping, and you're throwing away a full ride to Harvard." "My father is innocent," Maya said quietly. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Come on, Maya. He attacked his supervisor. There were witnesses. Just because you can't accept it doesn't mean the rest of us have to pretend it didn't happen." "You don't know him." "I know you're acting crazy. My dad says construction workers get violent all the time, especially when they're drinking or on drugs. Maybe your dad just snapped." Maya stood up slowly. "Your dad has never worked a day of manual labor in his life, and mine has never touched drugs or alcohol." But Jessica wasn't listening. "Maya, you're choosing him over your own future, over our friendship, over reality. It's not healthy." That afternoon, Maya sat alone in her car outside school, watching her former friends laugh about normal teenage problems. She felt ancient, like she'd aged years in the past month. Her phone buzzed with notifications. College recruiters, scholarship committees, summer program directors, all opportunities that felt as distant as the moon. Maya drove to the courthouse, parking across the street from the imposing building where her father's fate would be decided. She watched lawyers in expensive suits stride up the steps, briefcases in hand, confidence in every step. Then she saw a different group, families like hers, clutching public defender business cards and worry lines etched in their faces. 2 worlds that might as well have been different planets. A court clerk emerged for a cigarette break. Maya recognized him from her research visits and approached cautiously. "Excuse me, sir. I'm researching Judge Richardson's court for a school project. Do you know anything about his judicial philosophy?" The clerk, a black man in his 50s, looked around nervously. "Little girl, let me give you some free advice. That judge has ended careers for less than what you're probably thinking. If someone you care about is facing him..." He shook his head. "Start praying. Or start running." Maya's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" The clerk took a long drag. "Richardson don't just sentence folks. He destroys them, makes examples, sends messages. And he's got friends in high places who make sure nobody questions his methods." "But that's illegal." There have to be oversight mechanisms, appeals processes. The clerk laughed bitterly. Child, you still believe the system works the way they taught you in civics class. Richardson's been doing this for 12 years. You think nobody's noticed? You think nobody's tried to stop him? Maya felt her knees go weak. What happened to them? Transfer requests denied, bar complaints dismissed, career advancement blocked. The clerk dropped his cigarette and ground it under his heel. That man has power you can't imagine. And your daddy... He looked at Maya with genuine pity. Your daddy's just another number to him. As the clerk walked away, Maya stood alone on the courthouse steps, the weight of impossibility crushing down on her shoulders. Her father was facing a rigged system, a biased judge, and a legal process designed to chew up people like him. She was 17 years old with no money, no connections, and no real legal training. But as Maya stood there, watching the sun set behind the courthouse dome, something crystallized inside her. They expected her to give up. They expected her to accept the inevitable. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The jail visitation room smelled like disinfectant and despair. Maya pressed her palm against the scratched plexiglass barrier, watching her father on the other side. In just 3 weeks, Marcus Williams had aged a decade. His shoulders, once strong from years of construction work, now sagged with defeat. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his shrinking frame. But it was his eyes that broke Maya's heart. The same intelligent eyes that used to light up when discussing her future now stared at the table. "Baby girl," Marcus said through the phone, his voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I should just take the plea deal. 2 years. I can survive 2 years. Maya's throat tightened. Dad, no. You didn't do anything wrong. Wrong doesn't matter in here. Marcus gestured around the visiting room filled with other families having desperate conversations. Look around, Maya. You see any of these people getting justice? You see any fair trials? Maya followed his gaze. In every corner, black and brown families clutched phones, tears streaming down their faces. Children asking when Daddy was coming home, wives trying to hold everything together. This is my reality now, Marcus continued, and I can't let you sacrifice your life trying to change it. Harvard is calling about your enrollment. Your mother told me. You have to go. I'm not leaving you here. Marcus leaned forward, pressing his hand against the glass opposite hers. Maya, listen to me. I've watched you your whole life. Watched you read those law books like they were fairy tales. You were born for something bigger than this place. I was born to fight for my family. Then fight for us by becoming what you're meant to be. Don't let them destroy 2 Williams' lives. 1 is enough. Everyone wanted her to walk away, to accept that some battles couldn't be won. That night, Maya sat in her bedroom surrounded by college acceptance letters, her laptop open to housing applications. The smart play was obvious. Take the Harvard scholarship, build a successful career, maybe come back in 20 years and make a difference. But as she reached for the enrollment forms, her hand brushed against one of her father's old law books. The worn copy of constitutional law fell open to the 6th Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Maya stared at those words until they blurred. Assistance of counsel. Her father had counsel, a burned-out public defender who'd already given up. But what if? Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, searching legal databases with new purpose. She wasn't looking for assault precedents anymore. She was looking for something else entirely. Ferretta v. California, 1975. The Supreme Court ruled that defendants have a constitutional right to represent themselves in criminal proceedings. Maya's heart started racing, but self-representation wasn't enough. Her father needed help, and she had spent months learning his case better than any lawyer. She dug deeper. People v. Sharp, Ohio Court of Appeals, 1987. The court recognized limited circumstances where family members could assist pro se defendants, particularly when the defendant had been denied adequate counsel. Maya cross-referenced the ruling with Ohio's current statutes. There it was, buried in Section 841.2 of the Ohio Criminal Code. A pro se defendant may request familial assistance in cases where counsel has been deemed inadequate, subject to court approval. The legal loophole existed. It was narrow, rarely used, and would require proving that Garrett's representation was inadequate. But it was there. Maya printed the cases, her hands shaking with excitement. For the first time in weeks, she felt hope crackling through her veins. Maya's transformation began that night. She cleared her desk of college applications, replacing them with legal pads, case files, and procedural manuals. Her bedroom became a war room. She started with the basics, memorizing every rule of criminal procedure, every evidence standard, every objection protocol. While her classmates studied for calculus tests, Maya studied cross-examination techniques. The public library became her law school. Maya arrived each morning as doors opened, claimed her corner table, and didn't leave until closing. She took detailed notes on everything: jury selection strategies, opening statement structures, closing argument techniques. Mrs. Lane, the librarian, watched Maya's evolution with growing concern. "Maya, dear, are you eating enough? You look thinner every day." Maya glanced up from a witness examination manual. "I'm fine, Mrs. Lane. Just focused." "What you're doing, Shine, it's remarkable, but it's also impossible. You know that, right?" Maya met her eyes. Impossible is just another word for something nobody's tried hard enough to achieve. Day by day, Maya's confidence grew. She practiced opening statements in her bedroom mirror, rehearsing until every word flowed naturally. She memorized case citations, evidence rules, and procedural statutes until they became second nature. But knowledge wasn't enough. Maya needed to understand her enemy. She spent hours researching Judge Richardson's background, his education, his career trajectory. She read every interview he'd ever given, watched every speech at legal conferences. Richardson had built his reputation on being tough on crime, code for harsh on people who look like my father. He'd run for judge on a platform of restoring order and ending the revolving door of justice. The more Maya learned about Richardson, the more she understood what she was facing. This wasn't just a biased judge. This was a man who'd built his entire career on people like her father. But Maya also discovered something else. Richardson's reputation wasn't as solid as it appeared. There had been whispers over the years, complaints about his conduct, questions about his sentencing patterns. Nothing had stuck because nobody had been brave enough to compile the evidence systematically. Maya had been compiling that evidence for weeks without realizing it. 3 days before the trial, Maya made her decision. She walked into the jail for what everyone assumed would be her goodbye visit. "Dad," she said, picking up the phone and looking directly into his eyes. "I found a way to represent you in court." Marcus stared at her. "Baby girl, what are you talking about?" "There's a legal provision that allows family members to assist pro se defendants when their counsel is inadequate. I can be your voice in that courtroom." "Maya, no. You're 17 years old. You don't know what you're up against." Maya's voice hardened with resolve. "I know exactly what I'm up against. A corrupt judge who's built his career destroying people like us. A system that assumes you're guilty because of your skin color." She leaned forward, pressing her hand against the glass. "But Dad, I also know something else. I know every case Richardson has tried in the past 5 years. I know every legal precedent that applies to your situation. I know the law better than that public defender ever will." Marcus studied his daughter's face, the determination in her eyes, the steel in her voice, the transformation from scared teenager to fierce advocate. "And I know," Maya continued, that knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. You taught me that, remember? For the first time in weeks, Marcus Williams smiled. Not the defeated smile of a broken man, but the proud smile of a father watching his daughter become everything he'd always known she could be. Then let's go to war, baby girl. 2 days before the trial, Maya sat outside Morrison Construction Company, watching workers leave. She'd been waiting 3 hours for Carlos, the security guard listed as unavailable for comment in the police report. At 6:47 p.m., she spotted him walking toward the parking lot. "Excuse me, Carlos." He turned, immediately wary. "Who's asking?" "Maya Williams. Marcus Williams is my father." Carlos went pale. "I can't talk to you." "I told the police everything." "Did you? The report says you were unavailable for comment." Carlos stopped walking. "Kid, I got mouths to feed. I can't lose this job." Maya showed him the news article. "They're sending my father to prison for 10 years for something he didn't do. You saw what really happened." "I saw nothing." His voice cracked. "My father was protecting your crew from a drunk crane operator. Morrison attacked first, didn't he?" Carlos lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "Morrison's connected. His family owns half the construction contracts in this city. People who cross him don't work here anymore." "And people who let innocent men go to prison?" Something in Maya's eyes, the same steel he'd seen in her father, made Carlos pause. "There's security footage," he said quietly. Maya's heart stopped. "What?" "The cameras weren't broken like Morrison claimed. I saved everything." Carlos looked around, then decided. "Follow me." They walked to the office building. Carlos used his key card, leading Maya to the security office. "Morrison told me to delete this," Carlos said, sitting at the monitors. "Said the hard drives crashed." "But you didn't?" "My sister was assaulted 2 years ago. The guy got off, no evidence. I swore I'd never let that happen again." The screen flickered to life, showing construction site camera angles. Carlos fast-forwarded to the incident timestamp. "There's your dad talking to Morrison about Rodriguez on the crane." Maya watched her father approach Morrison calmly, gesturing toward the unsteady crane operator. Morrison's body language was aggressive from the start. "Watch this." On screen, Morrison shoved Marcus hard. Her father stumbled backward, hands up peacefully. Morrison advanced again, swinging wildly. Only then did Marcus defend himself, one controlled push that sent Morrison into the rebar stack. "Morrison came at your dad like a maniac," Carlos said. "Textbook self-defense." Maya stared at the screen, tears streaming. Here was undeniable proof of her father's innocence. "Why didn't you come forward?" Carlos ejected the USB drive. "Because Morrison made clear what happens to people who cross him." He handed Maya the drive. "But some things are more important than paychecks." Maya clutched the USB like gold. "This changes everything." "Maybe, but Maya..." Carlos's expression grew serious. "Morrison's brother-in-law owns Richardson and Associates, Judge Richardson's family business. They've been steering city contracts to each other for years." The pieces clicked into place. "That's why Richardson is determined to convict my father." "It's not bias, it's business." "That judge protects Morrison's interests. Workers who complain about safety violations end up in his courtroom facing trumped-up charges. Your dad's case is part of a pattern." Maya's mind raced. She had evidence to prove her father's innocence, but also proof of corruption at the very top. "Carlos, will you testify?" He nodded slowly. "If you guarantee my family's safety, yeah. It's time someone stood up to these people." Maya walked to her car, carrying more than evidence. She carried the key to exposing an entire corruption network. As she drove home, one thought pounded. They weren't just saving her father. They were bringing down the whole system. The morning of the trial, Maya walked into the Cleveland Municipal Courthouse carrying 3 thick binders. Media cameras flashed as she climbed the stone steps. The teenager representing her father had become news. Inside the packed courtroom, every seat was filled. Maya spotted her mother in the front row, clutching a tissue. Behind her sat Marcus's construction crew, taking time off work they couldn't afford. On the other side, Morrison sat with his expensive legal team, smug expression intact. Judge Richardson entered, black robes flowing like a cape. The bailiff called for order as everyone stood. Maya felt hundreds of eyes on her as she took her place at the defense table next to her father. Marcus squeezed her hand. "You sure about this, baby girl?" Maya straightened her shoulders. "I've never been more sure of anything." The prosecutor, District Attorney Kevin Walsh, was a political climber known for aggressive tactics and a perfect conviction rate. He'd already given 3 television interviews, calling the case a clear example of workplace violence that cannot be tolerated. Judge Richardson banged his gavel. "This court is now in session. I understand there's been an unusual request regarding representation." Maya stood, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Your Honor, my name is Maya Williams. I'm here to invoke my client's right to familial assistance under Ohio Criminal Code Section 841.2. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Richardson's face darkened. "Young lady, this is highly irregular. Are you telling me you intend to represent the defendant?" "I'm telling you that my father, Marcus Williams, is exercising his constitutional right to self-representation with familial assistance, as established in Ferretta v. California and recognized under Ohio statute." Prosecutor Walsh jumped up. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A 17-year-old child cannot possibly provide adequate legal representation. This is a serious felony case, not a high school mock trial." Maya pulled out her legal brief, hands steady now. "Your Honor, if I may direct the court's attention to People v. Sharp, Ohio. Court of Appeals, 1987, which specifically allows familial assistance when appointed counsel has been deemed inadequate." Judge Richardson's jaw tightened. "And what makes you think Mr. Garrett's representation is inadequate?" "The fact that Mr. Garrett advised my father to plead guilty to a crime he didn't commit without reviewing crucial evidence or interviewing key witnesses. He spent exactly 14 minutes on this case before recommending a plea deal." The gallery gasped. David Garrett, the public defender, shifted uncomfortably. Judge Richardson leaned forward, voice dripping with condescension. "Miss Williams, let me explain something. This is not a game. This is not a movie where plucky teenagers save the day. This is a court of law where serious adults handle serious matters." Maya met his gaze without flinching. "With respect, Your Honor, my father's freedom is the most serious matter in my life. I've spent the last month studying every aspect of this case more thoroughly than anyone else in this room." "You've spent a month?" Judge Richardson laughed, the sound echoing through the courtroom. "I've been practicing law for 30 years. Mr. Walsh has been prosecuting felonies for 15 years. You think 1 month of reading makes you qualified to—" "I think 1 month of caring makes me more qualified than a public defender who couldn't be bothered to return our phone calls," Maya interrupted. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Richardson's face flushed red. "Young lady, you will not interrupt this court. 1 more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Maya bowed her head slightly. "My apologies, Your Honor. I was simply exercising my client's rights under established legal precedent." Prosecutor Walsh saw his opening. "Your Honor, even if we allow this circus to continue, the defendant's guilt is clear. We have witness testimony, physical evidence, and a pattern of aggressive behavior. This is an open and shut case." Maya stood again. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case is built on lies, suppressed evidence, and witness intimidation. I can prove that every single allegation against my father is false." Judge Richardson's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Miss Williams, those are serious accusations. Do you have any idea what you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that the truth matters, Your Honor. even in your courtroom." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya had just implied that Judge Richardson's courtroom wasn't a place where truth mattered, a direct attack on his integrity. Judge Richardson's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire room. "Miss Williams, you are walking on very thin ice. I suggest you remember where you are and who you're addressing." Maya felt every person in the courtroom holding their breath. This was the moment of truth. She could back down, apologize, and hope for mercy, or she could stand her ground and fight for her father's life. She thought about the 43 black men Judge Richardson had sent away with sentences that destroyed families and communities. Maya lifted her chin and looked directly into Judge Richardson's eyes. "Your Honor, I know exactly where I am. I'm in a courtroom where my innocent father is facing 10 years in prison because the system failed him. I know exactly who I'm addressing, a judge who took an oath to ensure justice is served fairly and impartially." The silence was deafening. Judge Richardson's knuckles were white as he gripped his gavel. "Your Honor," Maya continued, voice growing stronger, "I respectfully request that you allow me to present evidence that will prove my father's innocence and expose the real criminal in this case." Judge Richardson stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Finally, he spoke. "Miss Williams, against my better judgment and the standards of this court, I will allow you to proceed. But understand this: any disruption, any violation of procedure, any disrespect to this court, and your father will face the maximum penalty under the law." Maya nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor. The defense is ready to proceed." As she sat down, Maya caught her father's eye. Marcus was looking at her with a mixture of terror and pride. She had just declared war on one of the most powerful men in the city's legal system, and Judge Richardson had just accepted her challenge. Prosecutor Walsh rose from his table, a predator's smile spreading across his face. He'd prosecuted hundreds of cases, and this 17-year-old girl was about to learn why he'd never lost. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Walsh began, his voice booming with authority, "what you're about to witness is exactly why children don't belong in courtrooms. The defendant, Marcus Williams, has a documented history of workplace violence that his daughter conveniently forgot to mention." Maya's blood ran cold. What history? Her father had never been arrested before this incident. Walsh pulled out a thick file. 3 separate complaints filed against the defendant over the past 2 years: aggressive behavior toward supervisors, threats against management, a pattern of escalating violence that culminated in the brutal attack on Jake Morrison. Maya shot to her feet. "Objection! Those documents were never disclosed during discovery." Judge Richardson barely glanced at her. "Overruled. The prosecution has the right to present all relevant evidence." "But, Your Honor, Brady v. Maryland requires—" "Miss Williams, I will not have you lecturing this court on case law you learned last week. Sit down." Walsh continued, emboldened. "The defense wants you to believe this was self-defense, but the evidence shows a man who'd been building toward this explosion for months, a man who finally snapped and attacked an innocent supervisor doing his job." Maya's hands shook as she flipped through her notes. None of this was in the original case file. These complaints had appeared out of nowhere, perfectly timed to destroy her father's credibility. "Furthermore," Walsh said, pulling out photographs, "the defendant's injuries were minimal compared to the severe trauma inflicted on Mr. Morrison. These photos show a man who was beaten within an inch of his life." The photos passed to the jury showed Morrison with a bandaged head, his face swollen and bruised. Maya stared in shock. Her father had barely touched Morrison, according to the security footage. How could Morrison look this injured? "Objection," Maya called out. "When were these photos taken?" Judge Richardson's gaze could have melted steel. "Miss Williams, you will ask questions during cross-examination, not during opening statements. One more interruption and you'll be held in contempt." Maya felt the case slipping away. Every piece of evidence she'd carefully prepared was being countered by documents that didn't exist a week ago. The jury was already looking at her father with suspicion and fear. Walsh moved closer to the jury box. The defendant wants sympathy because he's represented by his daughter. Don't be fooled. Marcus Williams is a dangerous man who uses his fists to solve problems. The evidence will show he attacked Jake Morrison without provocation, sending an innocent man to the hospital. Maya scribbled frantic notes. The photos had to be fake. The complaints had to be fabricated. But how could she prove it? And why was Judge Richardson allowing clearly inadmissible evidence? In conclusion, Walsh said, this case isn't about a father's love or a daughter's devotion. It's about holding violent criminals accountable for their actions. The state asks you to find Marcus Williams guilty of aggravated assault and send a message that workplace violence will not be tolerated in our community. Walsh sat down to complete silence. The jury looked convinced. Several were already shaking their heads at Maya, as if she were a naive child playing dress-up. Judge Richardson checked his watch. We'll take a 30-minute recess before the defense presents its opening statement. As the courtroom emptied, Maya remained at the defense table, staring at the fabricated evidence that had just destroyed her case before it began. Her father leaned over. Maya, baby girl, maybe we should take that plea deal. Walsh is right. I don't want you going down with me. Maya looked at her father's defeated face, then at the prosecutor packing up his perfectly orchestrated lies. In the gallery, Morrison was whispering to someone on his phone, a satisfied smirk on his face. They'd been ready for her. Every move she'd planned, every argument she'd prepared, they'd already countered. The fix was in deeper than she'd imagined. Maya stood up, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder. She walked toward the courthouse exit, past the reporters waiting for a statement, past the supporters who'd believed in her father's innocence. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and stared at the USB drive Carlos had given her, the security footage that proved everything. But would Judge Richardson even allow it into evidence? And how could she authenticate it without Carlos, who was probably already being threatened to stay quiet? Maya felt the weight of impossible odds crushing down on her shoulders. She was 17 years old, facing a prosecutor with unlimited resources, a biased judge, and a system designed to chew up people like her father. But as she stood there in the empty hallway, Maya remembered something her father had taught her. Knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. They'd ambushed her with lies. Now it was time to hit back with the truth. Maya returned to the courtroom with fire in her eyes. The 30-minute recess had transformed her from a nervous teenager into something dangerous. She carried her laptop like a weapon. The defense may present its opening statement, Judge Richardson announced, barely concealing his irritation. Maya stood, walking to the center of the courtroom. Every person in the packed gallery leaned forward. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution just told you a story. A carefully crafted fiction designed to send an innocent man to prison. Her voice carried new authority. But I'm going to show you the truth. She clicked her laptop. The large courtroom screen illuminated with a crystal-clear video feed. This is security footage from Morrison Construction on the day of the alleged assault. Footage the prosecution somehow forgot to mention. Prosecutor Walsh shot to his feet. Objection! This evidence wasn't disclosed. Your Honor, Maya interrupted smoothly. The prosecution just introduced undisclosed evidence without warning. I'm simply following their precedent. Judge Richardson's face darkened. Where did you obtain this footage? From the security company contracted by Morrison Construction. The same company that was ordered to delete this evidence. Maya's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. But someone had the courage to preserve the truth. On screen, the footage showed Marcus approaching Morrison calmly. Morrison's aggressive posture was obvious, even without sound. Watch carefully, Maya said. You'll see Morrison shove my father first. You'll see my father try to de-escalate. You'll see Morrison attack again. The video played exactly as Carlos had described. Morrison shoved Marcus hard. Marcus stumbled but kept his hands up peacefully. Morrison swung wildly. Only then did Marcus defend himself with one controlled push. The courtroom was dead silent. Several jury members sat forward, studying the screen. Walsh jumped up again. "Your Honor, this footage could be doctored, manipulated." "Could be," Maya said, "but it wasn't. Your Honor, I call Carlos Martinez to authenticate this evidence." Judge Richardson's knuckles went white around his gavel. Mr. Martinez was unavailable for testimony. "He's available now." Maya nodded toward the back of the courtroom. Carlos Martinez walked down the aisle, his security uniform crisp, his face determined. The gallery murmured as he approached the witness stand. Judge Richardson leaned forward menacingly. "Mr. Martinez, are you certain you want to testify? Perjury charges carry serious penalties." Carlos met his gaze without flinching. "I'm certain, Your Honor. It's time to tell the truth." Maya approached the witness stand. "Mr. Martinez, were you working security on the day of the incident?" "Yes. I witnessed everything." "Did Morrison attack my father first?" "Absolutely. Morrison was aggressive from the start. Your father was trying to protect the crew from a drunk crane operator. Morrison didn't want to hear it." Walsh objected frantically. "Your Honor, this witness was thoroughly investigated. He was unavailable." "I was threatened," Carlos said loudly. "Morrison told me if I testified, I'd never work construction again. My family would be blacklisted." Maya turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is how the system works for people like my father. Evidence disappears, witnesses are silenced, truth becomes inconvenient." She clicked to a new slide showing financial documents. "But the corruption goes deeper. Morrison Construction is owned by the Morrison family. Richardson and Associates, Judge Richardson's family business, has received over $2 million in contracts from Morrison Construction in the past 5 years. The courtroom erupted. Judge Richardson banged his gavel violently. "Miss Williams, you are in contempt." "Your Honor," Maya's voice rose above the chaos, "these are public records, filed with the city clerk's office. Your family business has been steering city contracts to Morrison Construction while you've been sending workers who complain about safety violations to prison." Walsh was on his feet screaming objections. Judge Richardson's face was purple with rage, but Maya wasn't finished. "The fabricated complaints against my father? They were filed after Morrison Construction lost a city contract due to safety violations. The fake injury photos? Taken weeks after the incident at a private medical facility owned by..." Maya paused for effect. "Richardson and Associates." She turned to face Judge Richardson directly. "Your Honor, this isn't just about my father. This is about a systematic corruption scheme that has destroyed dozens of families. Workers who speak up about unsafe conditions get arrested. Their families get destroyed. All so your business can profit." Judge Richardson slammed his gavel. "I will not tolerate these accusations in my courtroom," Maya's voice carried to every corner of the room. "Then step down from this case. Recuse yourself. Let an impartial judge hear the evidence." The silence was deafening. Judge Richardson stared at Maya, his career hanging in the balance. Every person in the courtroom understood what was happening. A 17-year-old girl had just exposed a corruption network that reached the highest levels of the city's justice system. "Furthermore," Maya continued, her confidence absolute now, "I have documentation of 43 similar cases. 43 black men sentenced by this court to terms averaging 394% above state guidelines. 43 families destroyed to protect Morrison Construction's interests." She faced the jury one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is clear. My father is innocent. The real criminals are sitting in this courtroom right now, but they're not at the defendant's table." Maya returned to her seat as the courtroom buzzed with shock and admiration. She had just destroyed the prosecution's case, exposed a massive corruption scheme, and proved her father's innocence beyond any doubt. Judge Richardson sat frozen, his world crumbling around him. Walsh shuffled papers frantically, knowing his perfect record was about to be shattered. And Maya Williams, the girl they'd dismissed as a naive child, had just delivered the most devastating legal argument the Cleveland Municipal Courthouse had ever witnessed. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Judge Richardson gripped his gavel, his face ashen as the weight of Maya's revelations settled over everyone present. The corruption scheme he'd built over 12 years had just been exposed by a 17-year-old girl. Prosecutor Walsh frantically shuffled through his papers, searching for something, anything, to salvage his case. But there was nothing left. The fabricated evidence had been exposed, the witness intimidation revealed, and the financial connections laid bare for all to see. Judge Richardson's voice came out as barely a whisper. This court will recess for 15 minutes while I consider the evidence presented." But Maya wasn't finished. She stood one final time, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just changed history. "Your Honor, before you recess, I have one more piece of evidence." Maya pulled out a thick folder. Affidavits from 17 other construction workers who were threatened, arrested, or blacklisted after reporting safety violations to Morrison Construction. All of their cases went through your courtroom. All received sentences far above state guidelines. She placed the folder on the clerk's desk. These men and their families deserve justice, too. Judge Richardson stared at the folder as if it contained poison. His hands trembled as he reached for it, knowing that opening it would seal his fate permanently. "Your Honor," Maya continued, "the evidence is overwhelming. My father is innocent. The system failed him, but it doesn't have to fail others. Justice demands that you recuse yourself from this case immediately." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, Judge Richardson set down his gavel. His voice was barely audible. "This court acknowledges that there may be conflicts of interest that prevent me from ruling impartially on this matter. I hereby recuse myself from this case." The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the exits, calling their editors. The gallery buzzed with excited whispers. Maya's mother burst into tears of relief. But Judge Richardson wasn't done. He looked directly at Maya, his career in ruins, his reputation destroyed by a teenager with law books and determination. "Miss Williams," he said, his voice carrying grudging respect, "in 30 years of practice I have never seen such thorough preparation or fearless advocacy. You have reminded this court what justice is supposed to look like." Maya met his gaze without triumph, only the quiet dignity of someone who had fought for truth and won. "Thank you, Your Honor. All I wanted was a fair trial for my father." Within hours, Judge Patricia Martinez was assigned to the case. A respected jurist known for her integrity, she reviewed Maya's evidence in her chambers before court reconvened. When she entered the courtroom, her first words changed everything. "After reviewing the evidence presented by the defense, this court finds the prosecution's case to be fundamentally flawed and potentially fraudulent. All charges against Marcus Williams are hereby dismissed." Maya felt her knees go weak. Marcus reached for her hand, tears streaming down his face. Judge Martinez continued. "Furthermore, this court is referring the evidence of corruption and witness intimidation to the State Attorney General's office for immediate investigation. Mr. Richardson, you are hereby barred from hearing any cases pending this investigation." The bailiff approached Marcus with the key to his handcuffs. The metal clicked open, and for the first time in months, Marcus Williams was truly free. Father and daughter embraced as the courtroom erupted in applause. Construction workers who had taken time off they couldn't afford were cheering. Maya's mother rushed to join them, the three of them holding each other as tears of joy flowed freely. Prosecutor Walsh quietly packed his files, his perfect record shattered by a teenage girl who refused to accept injustice. Morrison sat in stunned silence, knowing that criminal charges were likely coming his way. But the most powerful moment came when Carlos Martinez approached Maya as the crowd began to disperse. Miss Williams, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for giving me the courage to do what was right. My daughter is going to grow up in a world where people fight back because of what you did today. Maya shook his hand, understanding that this victory was bigger than just her father's freedom. They had exposed a system of corruption that had destroyed countless families. They had shown that truth could triumph over power when someone was brave enough to fight for it. As they walked down the courthouse steps, Maya was surrounded by reporters shouting questions, but she only had one statement. My father is innocent, and today justice was served, but this isn't just about one case. This is about holding our system accountable and making sure every family gets the fair trial they deserve. Marcus Williams put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, looking at her with wonder and pride. The girl who had spent her childhood reading law books in their small apartment had just taken on the most powerful people in the city and won. 6 months later, Maya Williams walked across the stage at her high school graduation, but her cap held more than just a tassel. Tucked inside was her acceptance letter to Harvard Law School with a full scholarship. Not the one she'd almost lost, but a new one created specifically for students who demonstrate extraordinary courage in pursuing justice. The Williams family apartment looked different now. The same law books lined the walls, but they were joined by new additions. Framed newspaper articles about the corruption case, a photo of Maya receiving the Cleveland Bar Association's Young Advocate Award, and letters from families whose loved ones were being retried after Judge Richardson's conviction. Marcus had returned to construction work, but now as a safety supervisor with the power to shut down dangerous operations. The same crews who had watched him get arrested now looked to him as a leader and protector. You know what I'm proudest of? Marcus asked his daughter as they packed boxes for her move to Cambridge. Maya looked up from folding her clothes. What, Dad? You didn't just save me. You saved every worker who'll never have to face a rigged system because you had the courage to expose it. Maya smiled, picking up the worn copy of constitutional law that had started everything. You taught me that knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. And you taught me that courage is what turns knowledge into justice. The investigation Maya triggered had resulted in 17 wrongful convictions being overturned. Judge Richardson was serving 5 years for corruption. Morrison Construction had been shut down, its contracts redistributed to companies that actually followed safety regulations. But Maya's biggest victory wasn't in the courthouse. It was in the dozens of letters she received from young people who saw her story and decided they wouldn't accept injustice in their own lives. At Harvard Law School orientation, Maya stood before 200 of the brightest legal minds in the country. But she knew something they didn't, that the most powerful force in any courtroom isn't prestige or connections or expensive suits. It's someone who refuses to be silent when they witness injustice. As Maya began her studies, she carried with her a simple truth. Every system, no matter how powerful or corrupt, can be changed by one person brave enough to stand up and fight. What injustice will you refuse to accept? Maya asked the camera during her final interview. What corruption will you expose? What family will you fight for? She looked directly into the lens, the same steel in her eyes that had faced down Judge Richardson. They underestimated a black girl with law books and a righteous cause. What are they underestimating about you? The system tried to break the Williams family. Instead, Maya Williams broke the system, and that's just the beginning. If Maya's story inspired you to never give up fighting for what's right, smash that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they refuse to stay silent. What injustice will you refuse to accept? Tell us in the comments below.